You have to pay a premium to land a proven star.
The Colts organization that they did in fact trade for Trent Richardson, giving up a first-round pick in the 2014 draft.
Look, children, it's a falling star. Make a wish.
There have been several occasions where an NFL GM traded away a first-round pick for a non-superstar level player. So today, we're gonna dive into 10 NFL players who somehow and some way were traded for a first-round pick. Rick Mirer. The Seattle Seahawks used the number 2 pick of the 1993 NFL Draft on Notre Dame quarterback Rick Mirer, hoping that he would provide this team some long-term stability behind center. Mirer, of course, went down as an all-time draft bust in the Pacific Northwest. In 4 seasons, he went 20-31 as the starter with 41 touchdowns against 56 interceptions, never throwing more than 13 TDs in a season. Incredibly, the Chicago Bears were still optimistic about Mirer's potential and traded the number 11 pick of 1997 to Seattle in exchange for the quarterback and a 4th-round pick. Yep, Chicago gave up a first-round pick for arguably the worst starting QB in the league at the time. Seattle then used that ammo to move up and draft future superstar corner Sean Springs at number 3 overall. Mirer appeared in only 7 games with Chicago, tossing no touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Mirer was then released by Chicago after the 1997 season. And to think, they thought giving up a first-round pick for this guy was a good idea. Oof. Ricky Williams. Just about every diehard NFL fan is familiar with the Ricky Williams trade. One so notable and disastrous that it has its own Wikipedia page. At the 1999 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints traded 8 draft selections, headlined by 2 first-rounders, to Washington so that way they could move up and take Texas running back Ricky Williams with the number 5 selection. The trade is known as an all-time flop in NOLA. But did you know that the Saints wound up recuperating some of that lost draft capital anyway? That's right. After 3 years in the Big Easy, Williams was traded to the Miami Dolphins in the 2002 offseason in a package deal that netted the Saints 2 first-round picks. Bet you kids didn't know that one. Unlike New Orleans, however, Miami actually got good value out of Williams. He finished with over 10,000 career rushing yards and won the rushing title in 2002, earning first-team All-Pro nods along the way. So, yeah, it actually kind of worked out, much to literally everybody's surprise. Roy Williams. The Dallas Cowboys employed one of the league's top safeties at the 2000s in Roy Williams. The other Roy Williams was a standout receiver on the Detroit Lions who broke out in 2006 with an 82-catch, 1,310-yard season. During the 2008 season, Dallas united the 2 Roy Williams by acquiring the Lions star for 3 draft picks, including a 2009 first-rounder. He then immediately signed a $45 million extension. That trade, of course, went down as an all-time flop for Jerry Jones. Williams lasted just 3 seasons in Big D, compiling 94 receptions for 1,324 yards and 13 touchdowns. Oh well, I mean, hey, at least the other Roy Williams was a star in Dallas. Trent Richardson. Early in the 2013 season, the Indianapolis Colts acquired Richardson from the Cleveland Browns in exchange for their 2014 first-round draft choice. The number 3 pick of the 2012 NFL Draft showed signs of stardom as a rookie, tallying 950 rushing yards and 11 scores. But the Browns were curiously willing to cut ties with him relatively quickly, and the Colts were even more curiously happy to give up a day 1 pick for his services. The hope was that he would bolster the ground game for Andrew Luck and emerge as a long-term cornerstone piece on this offense. Well, it did not take long for the Colts to feel buyer's remorse. Richardson had just 458 rushing yards and 3 TDs following the trade, averaging a woeful 2.9 yards per carry. He was no better in 2014, tallying 519 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns in 15 games. The Colts cut Richardson after just 2 seasons, and he never played another down in the NFL. Making this trade even more disastrous, however, well, the Browns would go on to use that first-round pick from Indy to trade up and select Johnny Manziel, 22nd overall in the 2014 draft. And, well, I think we all know how that one went. Carson Wentz. After a dismal 2020 season that saw him losing the starting job to rookie Jalen Hurts, Wentz demanded a trade from the Philadelphia Eagles. Less than 2 years after he signed a 4-year extension worth $128 million. The Colts acquired Wentz from the Eagles in exchange for a 2021 third-round pick and a conditional 2022 second-round pick that wound up becoming a first-rounder. Indy's hope was that head coach Frank Reich, Wentz's old offensive coordinator in Philly, would restore the talents of the number 2 pick of 2016. Wentz's stats in Indy weren't actually all that terrible. A 62.4 completion percentage, 3 3,563 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and heck, only 7 interceptions. Problem is that Wentz imploded in way too many big game moments that saw the Colts cough up several double-digit point leads. Fortunately, they just needed a win over football's worst team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, in Week 18 in order to secure a playoff berth. This was a guaranteed W. But Wentz was just a no-show in this game, as the Colts lost 26-11 to miss out on the postseason. Owner Jim Irsay was so enraged that he made the Colts trade Wentz, who was then unloaded to the Washington Commanders for draft picks. Still pretty funny that the Colts gave up a first-rounder for a guy who had one great season under his belt. And by the way, Philly used those picks from Indy in the Wentz trade to eventually land A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Carter. So, yeah. Sam Bradford. Less than 2 weeks before the start of the 2016 season, the Minnesota Vikings lost starting QB Teddy Bridgewater for the year with a season-ending ACL tear that he suffered during practice. GM Rick Spielman quickly panicked and traded his 2017 first-round pick and a conditional 2018 fourth-rounder to the Philadelphia Eagles for former first overall pick Sam Bradford. 'Twas a surprising move at the time because, well, Bradford had looked like a draft bust up until that point. But you know, to his credit, the X-Ram played pretty well with a 71.6 completion percentage and 20 touchdowns against only 5 interceptions. However, Minnie's 8-8 record was not enough to make the postseason. Bradford suffered a knee injury in the 2017 season and wound up losing his starting job to veteran journeyman Case Keenum, who would go on to lead Minnesota to the NFC Championship game. Bradford signed a 2-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals in 2018 free agency, but was released after losing his starting job to rookie Josh Rosen. Hindsight makes the Bradford trade even more baffling for Minnesota, however. His career with the Rams was completely marred by injuries, with Bradford only appearing in 49 games during his 5 years with the organization. Not to mention that he wasn't exactly, well, very good in his 1-year stop with the Eagles. Sean Gilbert. Gilbert looked like a budding star defensive lineman for the Los Angeles/St. Louis Rams in his 4-year tenure, earning a Pro Bowl nod in his sophomore 1993 campaign. That year, Gilbert posted 10.5 sacks. He had just 8.5 over the next 2 seasons, however, and yet that was enough for Washington to give up the number 6 pick in the star-studded 1996 draft in exchange for Gilbert. Gilbert lasted just 1 season in DC. He sat out the entire 1997 campaign because of a contract dispute before signing a lucrative 7-year deal worth $46.5 million with the Carolina Panthers in free agency. By the way, Washington's decision to trade the number 6 pick cost them the chance to draft a future superstar like Ray Lewis, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Eddie George. Andre Rison. Rison had one of the more interesting NFL careers. He was a first-round pick of the Colts in 1989, but spent just 1 year there before he was traded to the Atlanta Falcons in a blockbuster deal, but more on that later. In 1995, the Cleveland Browns handed the former Falcons star a massive 5-year deal worth $17 million. He lasted just 1 year there before being let go, making Rison one of the worst free agent signings in league history. But then Rison became a hero in Green Bay when he helped the Packers to a Super Bowl championship in the 1997 season. So he was essentially a bust in Indy, a superstar in Atlanta, a free agent flop in Cleveland, but a champion in Green Bay. Jeez, talk about polarizing. Anywho, you may be surprised to learn that Rison was traded to Atlanta in 1990 in a trade that netted Indy a first-round pick. That's a pretty good return when you consider that Rison didn't exactly light up the scoreboard in his 1 season with the Colts. Jeff George. Hey look, another former Colts player on the list. Remember when we talked about the Andre Rison to Atlanta trade? Well, he was actually part of the package that the Colts sent so they could trade up and draft Illinois quarterback Jeff George with the number 1 pick. George never lived up to expectations in Indianapolis. He went 14-35 over his 4 seasons as the starting quarterback, completing only 57% of his pass attempts for 41 touchdowns and 46 interceptions. George never even hit 3,000 passing yards in a season with the Colts. And yet, the Falcons were happy to trade 1994 first and third round picks plus their 1996 first-rounder to Indianapolis in exchange for George. 2 firsts for a guy who was nothing short of a big-time bust. 90s were a funny time, alright. I mean, imagine if somebody gave up such a package for another QB bust like Mitch Trubisky, Josh Rosen, Daniel Jones, or Blake Bortles. John Haddle. Hattle had a decorated career with the San Diego Chargers, leading them to an AFL championship in the 1963 season. The four-time AFL All-Star made a smooth transition to the NFL following the merger, earning first-team All-Pro honors with the Rams in the 1973 season. The Green Bay Packers, almost a decade removed from the glorious Vince Lombardi, Bart Starr dynastic years, were in desperate need of a quarterback. During the 1974 season, the Packers acquired Hattle from the Rams in exchange for 1975 and 1976 first-round picks, a pair of second-rounders, and a 1975 third-rounder. Clearly, the Packers thought that they were getting the superstar version of a 34-year-old Hattle when they made this move. But of course, the Hattle trade turned out to be by far the absolute worst in Green Bay Packers history. And that's saying a lot when you consider their success at QBs. But hey, which other NFL players were shockingly traded for a first-round pick? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.